Hello folks, my name is Sinow and today I'm here to talk to you about Resident Evil Resistance, a new online multiplayer PvP game coming from Capcom. Capcom hasn't had a lot of success when it comes to releasing spin-off games in the Resident Evil universe that are designed for online play. Previously they released Operation Raccoon City and Umbrella Corps. The reaction to these games ranged from, it's not the best but I quite like it, to, I hate this, it's rubbish. But I've been playing some Resident Evil Resistance and keeping track of this game's progress for a while, and I honestly believe that this could finally be the breakout success that Capcom has been gunning for the Resident Evil franchise for so long now. Some of you might already know that this game is coming for free with Resident Evil 3, and you're kind of fairly interested in it, in which case this video will still have lots of information for you. But for some of you, you're probably clicking on this and thinking to yourself, okay, what the hell are you talking about? What is this? What is this game? Please explain it to me. Here we go. Resident Evil Resistance is a 4 vs 1 asymmetrical online game where 4 survivors take on 1 mastermind. The 4 survivors have to try and get through what is pretty much just the world's most horrible escape room within a certain amount of time in order to win, and stopping them in their tracks is the person playing as the mastermind, who has access to devious creatures and traps that they can place down within the narrow corridors of each map to try and make the survivors' lives as difficult as possible. So some of you have just heard me describe this as a 4 vs 1 asymmetrical online game and thought to yourself, oh, Sinow, isn't this just Dead by Daylight with a Resident Evil skin attached to it? I'm so clever. But no, despite my slightly uncharitable impression of those of you who have thought that in the comments, I actually think Resident Evil Resistance is unique enough to stand on its own 2 feet. For a number of reasons. First of all, the Survivor Mastermind gameplay has a lot more active elements to it than Dead by Daylight, for instance. Survivor gameplay is taking place in third person, but also has like the kind of shooting mechanics of Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake. So it's over the shoulder, there's lots of different guns that have different effects, and I'll be honest with you, as much as I love Dead by Daylight, and please don't get me wrong, because I do really enjoy Dead by Daylight, a lot of the Survivor gameplay kind of looks like this. Which you have to admit, maybe isn't the most thrilling, involving gameplay that's ever been implemented into a video game. Mastermind gameplay is also considerably different from Dead by Daylight, rather than just kind of controlling a killer who runs around, which you do eventually do in Resident Evil Resistance. A lot of the Mastermind gameplay is actually taking place through cameras using a card system, which I'll discuss more in the Mastermind section of this video, but it leads to like a kind of more like evil scientist who's laying out traps and plans for the survivors who are trying to navigate through a maze kind of vibe to it, rather than chasing 4 survivors who always just seem to magically be that little bit faster than you are, even though you have the faster movement speed than them. And it drives you insane after a while. And I think Resident Evil Resistance might feel a bit more rewarding in that regard. There's a lot more active gameplay elements. The flow of a match in Resident Evil Resistance is also a little bit different from Dead by Daylight. It's maybe a little bit more similar to something like Left 4 Dead. There are 3 areas that survivors have to get through successfully in order to win, and each area has an objective attached to it that they must perform in order to succeed. Right now, every area has the same objective every time you play the game. I hope in future updates they add different objectives to try and keep it fresh, but for the time being, Area 1 always has 3 puzzle pieces that survivors have to collect and put into like a central board in order to proceed. Area 2 always has a zombie with like a security card on it, and survivors have to defeat this zombie and then use the card on 3 terminals in order to proceed. And finally, the most difficult objective in Area 3, survivors have to defeat, or destroy I guess, 3 biocores in a certain order before finally the exit gate becomes operational and they can escape. All of this I've mentioned so far, and I haven't even touched on the main scoring mechanic of Resident Evil Resistance, which is this timer that you see at the top of the screen. Survivors, like I said before, have to escape before the timer hits 0, but every time that a survivor completes an action that helps their chances, such as destroying a trap, defeating a zombie, or achieving one of the key objectives, more time is added to the clock. Conversely, as a mastermind, every time you do something to hamper the survivors, such as making them step in a trap, grabbing and biting them as a zombie, just generally making them regret the fact that they exist for 5 minutes, The usual evil umbrella scientist stuff. Some time is taken off of the clock instead, and like I said before, if the clock hits 0, then the survivors lose and the Mastermind wins. I think this is a really exciting part of Resident Evil Resistance, because when the music starts to kick in and you've only got 30 seconds left as a survivor, and like just in the nick of time you manage to complete a key objective and like 70 seconds is added to the clock and then you manage to keep the game going, I think that makes the game a lot more dynamic and really exciting. And honestly, this is one of the main reasons why I think Resistance could be like a real hit for Capcom, because the central mechanic is just so interesting and fun sometimes when you get these close matches. So this timer, along with the more active gameplay and the kind of from point A to point B style of how a match flows, really helps Resistance stand on its own two legs. There is an open beta for this game on March the 27th before its eventual launch on April 3rd, so you can even try this game out for free and then decide that you hate it and you never want to play it again before it comes out. Or maybe you'll love it, who knows? Maybe it will be your new jam and this is something you're going to get 1,000 hours in and you're going to get weirdly obsessed with it, because that's what I'm hoping that I'll do eventually. Remember that this game also comes for free with Resident Evil 3, so if you decide to buy that game, you've already bought Resident Evil Resistance. It's hard to lose with this proposition. The least you could do is boot it up and give it a chance. I feel like I'm about 5 seconds away from saying to you guys, come on here. Just one little round. Come on. Just a quick disclaimer before we dive into all of the characters that you can play in Resistance. I have been scouring the internet for every single shred of information related to this game. However, none of the footage that you see on screen has been recorded by myself. Some of it comes from a closed beta that people had access to previously, and some of it comes from an updated version of the game with more characters in it that only Games Press were privy to, and the links to these videos where I found all of this information from will be below this video, so if you want to see some more raw footage of the game in action, then you can click on those links and view it for yourself. Alright, let's start with the survivors. There are currently 6 survivors in Resident Evil Resistance, and unlike Dead by Daylight, you cannot have more than one person playing as the same survivor at the same time. So this means if you and your friend both want to try and insta-lock Valerie as soon as the game begins, one of you is going to go home disappointed. Every survivor has 2 active skills they can use, one regular skill that is available on a fairly short cooldown, and one fever skill, which essentially acts like your ultimate ability. One of the nice things about Resident Evil Resistance's UI is that if someone's fever skill becomes available, you'll see a little dialogue appear beside their portrait informing you of such, which makes it a little bit easier to coordinate things with your teammates. Aside from these 2 active skills, there are also 6 skill slots that you can change to create your own preferred build for each character. It's unknown at this stage whether the skills will be in like a kind of pool that all survivors share, or if the skills will be exclusive to each character. I'll probably make a video in the future going into detail about skills when we get more information on the topic. Okay, first of all, we have Samuel Jordan. He is your college jock that likes to beat zombies to death with his meaty clams, and a lot of his voice lines make him sound like a complete idiot, like this one.
Best defense is my strong offense!
Yeah, thanks for that one, Samuel. Real trenchant insight there, my friend. You nailed it. His regular skill, Dash Punch, allows him to dash towards an enemy and do a 3-hit combo on them for some melee damage. His fever skill is Fists of Iron. This is a stance that he goes into that allows him to box the ears off of zombies. It's really useful at repeatedly stunning a certain zombie. Say, for instance, if the Mastermind has taken control of a really powerful zombie, you can just repeatedly punch it over and over and it will do a light stun every time you connect with it, so that the Mastermind can't really use it, which is nice. He has high health and he really excels at using melee weapons to deal tons of damage, so you're going to want him on the front lines as you explore new rooms. Next up is the coolly named January Van Sant, the group's hacker who probably spent most of her childhood going around talking to people like this.
Do you know anything about hackers? Can you jam with the console cowboys in cyberspace? What?
Her regular skill Overload allows her to disable a camera. This is basically the same as shooting the camera, so that it can't work anymore, but instead of using your guns and like taking up ammo with it, she can do it a lot quicker with this ability. And her Fever skill EMP impairs all cameras and increases the costs of using cards for the Mastermind. So I haven't really discussed this yet, but the Mastermind has to use creature cards to summon a creature, and each one of those has a cost attached to it. So using January's skill, they're more expensive, and therefore the Mastermind can't summon as much all at once. I think she's the survivor that will most reward players that know what they're doing, because you need to know what it's like as a Mastermind to really know when to use January's skills to their full advantage. Moving on, we have the team's healer, Valerie Harmon, or as she should really be called, Valerie Harm Off. She has a fairly useful regular skill called Survival Instinct, which marks nearby items and threats so that they're easier to find. This is quite helpful in the first area when you need to find 3 puzzle parts to move on. But what's really powerful about her is her Fever skill, Modified First Aid Spray. I cannot overstate how useful this is, folks. What it does is you plonk a first aid spray down on the floor and it creates a circle of healing, which is quite useful for just making sure that everybody's topped up in the first place. But where this really shines is that if your allies are downed, usually you have to stand over them for a couple of seconds to get them back up again, otherwise they'll die. By using Valerie's Fever skill, you can just immediately get everyone on the floor back up again, which can turn the tides of a battle from 3 potential deaths into you winning the game. Remember that every time somebody on your team dies, that's 30 seconds off the clock, so you really can't afford to have people dying a lot. And I think this Fever skill is going to be super useful going forward. I expect you'll see lots of Valerie in Resident Evil Resistance, so get used to her because she's lovely and I like her. Now that we have the team's healer, we need the team's tank, and that tank is Tyrone, firefighter and hero to the kids of Raccoon City. He has high defense, and like Samuel, he excels in close quarters combat. I noticed in the beta that sometimes Samuel and Tyrone have the chance to do like a melee finisher move, which has a different animation from your normal melee attacks, and it does way more damage to zombies. I don't know if other survivors can actually do this, or if it's just those two, but keep an eye out for that. His regular skill, Power Kick, is a kind of like thrust kick that he can use to disrupt zombies. It doesn't do much damage, but it does stun them quite well. Just watch out for this one, as it's really easy if you're beside a zombie to have your foot just sail past them and miss. So you might want to take a little bit of a step back before you use it. His Fever skill, Rally, is a shout ability, which gives everyone a bit more defense for a while. It's pretty good, maybe not that exciting, but quite useful in situations where you're getting your face chewed off. So thanks for that, Tyrone. Okay, moving on to the 2 survivors who have only been added more recently. They weren't in the beta that I had access to previously, but I have managed to find quite a lot of footage of them. First off, we have Becca Willett, who's giving me some real Charlie's Angels vibes here. She's a little bit like Samuel's counterpart. Samuel excels in doing damage with melee weapons, Becca excels in doing damage with firearms. Her regular skill, Sentry Stance, allows her to take a knee. She can't move anymore when she's in this stance, but she does do more damage when she fires her bullets out of her gun. Nice, nailed it, good job. Just be careful with this one. You don't want to use Sentry Stance when you're behind an object, because otherwise you won't be able to see the zombies and then you can't shoot them. Not useful. Her Fever skill is really nice, Bullet Storm. It gives her infinite ammo with her firearms for a set period of time, so if you need to mow down a crowd of zombies or just blow up a biocore, Becca can take care of this with this Fever skill, and it's going to be super useful with things like shotguns and stuff. I think she's going to cause a lot of mayhem to zombie packs, and I'm really looking forward to trying her out when the game comes out soon. Last, and certainly by no means least, we have the man, the myth, the legend that is Martin Sandwich. That's right, this kid is called Martin Sandwich. I love it. He kind of looks like Finn Wolfhard in a couple of years' time, and his abilities allow him to disrupt large groups of zombies, which makes them easier to be taken out by your teammates or by Martin himself if he's packing heat. His regular skill, Makeshift Mine, is a mine that you can plonk down on the floor, and any zombie that walks over it will cause it to detonate, causing damage and stunning. And his Fever skill, Flash Baton, is a very quick use ability that allows you to stun large packs of zombies for a long period of time. This works especially well on zombie dogs. For some reason, they really don't like being blinded by flashes of light. Stupid dogs. I'm gonna have to name this guy when he comes out because he's called Martin Sandwich. I'm sorry, it's just too good a name. He's my main, I love him, get used to him. He's a bit of a dingus, but he's my dingus. So what about the Masterminds? Well, as I previously explained, Mastermind gameplay has two central components. One component is looking down at the survivors through the cameras and laying down traps and summoning creatures to try and stop them as they navigate your maze of death and destruction. Another facet of Mastermind gameplay is directly controlling creatures by making them your slaves. This allows you to perform certain zombie attacks and so on that will cause massive damage to survivors that you manage to catch, which keeps Mastermind gameplay quite exciting and varied. Every offensive action that you take as a Mastermind is done so through cards, and these cards have costs associated with them. In order to use a card, you have to spend some points that are in a central points bank that refills during the match. So you need to think very carefully about your resources and when and where to apply pressure as a Mastermind so that you're getting the most out of every card used, especially if you have a very expensive card with a powerful creature inside of it. Like the survivors, Masterminds have 7 skill slots that they can equip. They also have 2 extra slots for creature cards that become available in areas 2 and 3, so they have a ramping up in the power of the creatures that they can summon during the match according to your choosing. Masterminds also have an equivalent to the Fever skill in the BOW, the Bioorganic Weapon. This is a very powerful creature, well, usually, that the Masterminds can summon that you directly control and can deal massive damage to the survivors, often getting a few kills if you utilize it correctly. Every Mastermind has a unique BOW with different abilities and strengths and weaknesses, which we'll cover in a second. I haven't had the chance to play as a Mastermind yet because the closed beta had a rare bug where my Mastermind queues went on forever, but just looking at them, they look like they're going to be really fun to play, and a lot of the feedback to the game that I've seen so far from the press suggests that being a Mastermind is really, really fun, so I'm really excited for this. There are 4 Masterminds you can choose from in Resident Evil Resistance, 1 original character designed purely for this game, and 3 other characters from the Resident Evil franchise at large. The original character, Daniel Fabron, according to the lore, he was employed as Oswald Spencer's personally employed fixer, and he is supporting Alex Wesker in her virus research, although he's not actually a scientist himself. So how did he manage to pass the Umbrella Corporation's hiring interview process without any proper qualifications? Like, what are they doing over there? Who's in charge of the hiring process? Bunch of clowns. His creature cards have high costs associated with them, but they also have really high attack power, and his BOW is the Tyrant, aka Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. This uses the same model from Resident Evil 2's remake that we saw last year, has a lot of really strong melee abilities that require you to get close to the survivors, including a really annoying punch that you can spam over and over, and a one-hit kill grab move that takes a little while, but will crush a survivor's head, which just feels pretty good and evil when you're playing as the Mastermind. Next up is Annette Birkin. She is the central antagonist specifically for Claire's campaign in Resident Evil 2 Remake. She, along with her husband William, created the G virus in that game. She specializes in the ability to inject zombies to make them stronger, so she's quite good at applying pressure when needed on different parts of the map, depending on whether the survivors go close to certain zombies or not. Her BOW is her own infected husband, which is incredibly messed up. Annette, really inappropriate, thank you very much. Clear ethics violation on that one. And he has this adorable little lead pipe that he swings about that I guess gives him slightly more reach on top of, you know, his already massively mutated arms and limbs. He kind of actually looks a bit like James from Silent Hill 2. When I think of survival horror and people using lead pipes, I think of James from Silent Hill 2, and it's just funny how these things work out, don't you think? What an interesting coincidence. Joining Annette, we have the rather stylish and suave looking Alex Wesker, who, I'm not gonna lie, she kind of gives me some real Karen vibes here. If I was working retail and a woman like this walked into the store, I would run a mile because she will want to talk to the manager in like 5-10 minutes time. It is an inevitability. She is from Resident Evil Revelations 2, and I'm gonna be honest with you, there's no better way to describe her. It's just kind of bonkers. She spends most of that game just like standing around and quoting Kafka at you, you know, rambling about how she wants to be like the next step in human evolution, the usual crap that Umbrella villains come out with. Sorry Alex, but it's true, you're just talking nonsense. Despite her second name, she's not actually biologically related to the Wesker family, but she is adopted by Albert Wesker, in part of the Wesker project, and I think she becomes kind of like an adopted daughter for him. They have like a close bond to each other. She ends up working for Umbrella's intelligence division under Umbrella Pharmaceuticals, so I guess she's quite clever, maybe a little bit too clever for your own good, Alex. Alex specializes in increasing the survivors' kind of, I think it's poison or virus, I can't remember which terminology they use in the game, but it's an ongoing status effect where survivors take a bit of damage and get stunned periodically, and they have to use a blue herb to cure it. So that's quite useful for just annoying survivors and keeping them weak. And her BOW is called the Yativeo, which is Spanish for I see you, apparently. It's a really big plant with long tendrils that can scoop up survivors and eat them, which is really cool. And it can also shoot goo at them to stun them for long periods of time. The only thing about this BOW though that is a bit of a downside is that it can't move. So it has tons of HP and it effectively works as like a leafy doorstop where the survivors can't get past it without shooting tons of their ammo into it, but it can't move. So make sure that you put this somewhere where there isn't like an alternate path where the survivors can just walk around it. Otherwise you will have blown your BOW card for nothing. So just be wary of that one. If you put it behind the survivors or anything like that, you will waste it and you'll look like a clown. So be careful with this one, but if you use it correctly, I think it's going to be a massive time sink for survivors, a real pain in the neck to get rid of because it requires so much ammo, and just cool. Really cool BOW. I like its design a lot. Last up, we have Oswell E. Spencer, who looks a little bit like my granddad. He was sorry, I'm laughing at my own joke here. He was originally referred to in Resident Evil, the first one, but he doesn't really appear on screen until Resident Evil 5, where he talks about the right to be a god, and then is promptly owned by Wesker. Bit of a short on-screen debut there, womp womp, but you know, such is the life of a Resident Evil antagonist. From the footage that I've managed to see so far, he seems to specialize in using kind of tools, so things like using sentry guns on the cameras and traps and things like that over using creatures. And his BOW is maybe the most kind of disappointing BOW so far. It's not actually a creature, it's just a kind of laser wall barrier, which does do damage to survivors who try and pass through it, and it probably will be useful for just like cutting off their path through the levels. Apparently it has a shorter cooldown time than the other Masterminds BOWs, but it's not got the oomph of summoning a massive plant or a massive man, really. Let's be honest here as well. Bit of a disappointment, old man, but still kind of useful. I think he'll be the Mastermind that's most proficient in just annoying survivors to death. So if you like just kind of petty little nuisances in your Mastermind gameplay, I think Oswell is probably the Mastermind for you. So really, he's the petty choice. So in addition to all the shenanigans that the Masterminds have at their disposal that I've explained so far, they also seem to have the ability, according to this Famitsu video that I watched, to influence where key items spawn for the survivors across the levels. It seems like every map maybe has 4 preset locations for key items, or you can leave it up to random chance. This might allow an extra layer of strategy. For instance, maybe some Masterminds are better at defending corners, whereas other Masterminds are better at defending corridors or really large open spaces. And this will take place across 4 different maps that will be with the game on launch. A downtown area that was in the closed beta that we saw so far. This was quite generic. It was just some offices and then a warehouse in the back. In the warehouse, there are elevators that give the warehouse like a kind of 2-level environment, like an upstairs and a downstairs. Then after that, they introduced us to 2 more maps, a casino and an abandoned theme park, although it's kind of more like an abandoned horror theme park, or maybe just like a really large horror escape the room. The amount of detail and the props and the lighting and stuff is just really gorgeous to look at. Like, they've really outdone themselves, I think, with their arena design and just how beautiful everything looks in the Resident Evil engine. I also noticed in this Famitsu video that there seems to be a map called Laboratori, which is laboratory in Japanese. We haven't actually been officially introduced to this yet, but chances are this will be in the game on launch, and I'm looking forward to seeing how beautiful that looks as well. Every map has a unique element to it that can be manipulated to give the survivors a boost. So for instance, in the casino, in some footage, I noticed somebody playing the slots and then winning a whole shotgun from it, which is like the most wild casino ever to exist on the planet. The game director for Resident Evil Resistance was also kind enough to confirm to me that Masterminds have certain elements and maps that they can manipulate to give them an advantage. So if you notice anything as a mastermind that you can manipulate and get an advantage from when the game comes out, let me know in the comments, because I'm curious to find out about this. So now we know how a general match of Resident Evil Resistance goes and the characters that you can play as. What about the overall progression system? Well, it seems like there's a leveling system in the game, which probably will correspond to you leveling up the ranks of your skills, making them stronger and more powerful for both the survivors and the mastermind side. There's also a lot of really fun unlocks that don't really affect the gameplay itself. You can get new skins for characters and new skins for weapons. You can unlock emotes that you can use to communicate with your survivors if they don't have voice controls, or if you just want to dance around like an idiot, which is always fun. There's also sprays that you can put on the wall to leave a little bit of your own personal touch to proceedings. And the way that you'll unlock all of these fun extras is through loot boxes. Okay, I know, a lot of you are mad. I said the L word. Put the pitchforks down. Stop typing that mean comment. Just hear me out for a minute here. It might not be as bad as you think. Just hear me out, okay? So we don't have a lot of concrete information about loot boxes yet. We're going by a couple of screenshots that we've seen on Reddit so far, but it does seem like you can only buy cosmetics from loot boxes. You can't buy anything that makes your character stronger, and the ranking up of skills is done through experience points in regular gameplay. And it seems like survivors and masterminds have separate loot box pools, which you can purchase with an in-game currency. Umbrella credits, maybe something like that, where you can unlock these cosmetics without actually having to pay real money for it. My hope is that the system is similar to something like Overwatch's, where it's quite easy to buy a certain cosmetic in particular if you want it. If not, you can open up loot boxes on a fairly regular basis. And honestly, I've played Overwatch for a long time and I don't feel very forced into spending real-world money on it. Fingers crossed this is how the system is in Resistance. I hope it is, but I will make another video about the loot box system at a later date to inform you all of exactly the details of it, to see whether or not it's kind of fair or if it feels a little bit exploitative. I don't know, I'll try to be as fair as I can about this, but I'm going to make another video about it at a later point. So far, it seems like it could be okay. Fingers crossed. Okay, now that I've managed to probably annoy many of you, and I'm sure you're furiously typing a comment telling me why I'm wrong as we speak, that's pretty much everything I know about Resident Evil Resistance. I hope you found this video informative and it's gotten you a little bit more excited to play the game yourself. The reaction to this game wasn't very positive at first because they hadn't actually announced the Resident Evil 3 remake, but now that we know that we're getting the remake and this game comes for free with it, I think people's perception's beginning to change and they're becoming a little bit more willing and open to the idea of giving it a shot and seeing how it is. I really hope that this game is the success that Capcom has desperately wanted in the online space for the Resident Evil franchise. I really enjoyed playing this in the closed beta, and I'm going to be playing it every day over on twitch.tv/SinowBeats when the open beta becomes available on March 27th, and moving forward into the game's eventual launch in April 3rd. If you're new to my chat and you've watched this video and you're checking me out for the first time over on Twitch, leave a little message for me so that I know that the video managed to reach you. It would make my day, and hopefully we can have a fun time playing Resistance together when the game comes out. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and take care.